Welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. Get ready to explore the exciting world of financial advice as we embark on this special series exploring the very best in the industry. We'll be shining a spotlight on past winners of the prestigious Money Marketing Awards, sharing their stories and insight. Plus, we'll be gearing up for this year's highly anticipated award ceremony. Get inspired, gain valuable knowledge, and don't forget to secure your place at this year's unmissable event. Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Awards podcast. I'm Kimberley Dondo, and in today's episode, I'm joined by Sebastian Field, Associate Financial Planner at Attivo. Thank you for joining me today, Sebastian.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, cool. So is it Sebastian or Seb? I don't. What do you prefer?
Honestly, I don't mind. Either is fine, but I think I prefer generally Seb. Feels a bit more familiar to say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I didn't want to keep saying Sebastian if you didn't like that. But people always keep calling me Kimberly because I never really get to correct them. So, but anyway, yeah, so we're here today because you won the Financial Advisor to Be category and the 2023 Money Marketing Awards. So congratulations on that. What was that feeling like getting that award?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. Honestly, it was initially a bit of shock, to be honest with you, because I wasn't really expecting to win it. So it was sort of pleasantly surprising, but yeah, no, really happy to have won it, and it was a great night. So fond memories.
Awesome. And so this particular category recognizes new talent, including both young professionals and those starting a second career in financial advice. What do you think made you stand out among other entrants? And how does it feel, again, to be recognized as a rising star in financial advice?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question. In terms of what I think made me stand out, I think that's quite hard. I don't necessarily know the other candidates or how, why they were shortlisted or nominated, or kind of how they interviewed or anything like that. I think in terms of the reasons on the night, before they announced that I'd won it, whoever was speaking basically said, for various different reasons. And some of those reasons were to do with what I'd said in my interview about my passion for financial planning, and also the exams that I'd done in the past and my switch from my previous career in teaching, and how I felt at least that I was able to bring over some of those transferable skills from teaching in terms of making concepts that are sometimes quite difficult to understandable to people. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big part of financial planning and what we do. And also maybe some of the work I've done in schools since coming into financial planning, in terms of going into schools through the CII as part of their program to try and improve financial literacy. It's just, I guess, part of my passion for financial planning. And I think that financial planning is more of a concept or a factor to people generally. And I think financial literacy generally in this country, it could be improved, certainly for young people. So I definitely spoke about that quite a bit in my interview as well. I suppose it's probably a combination of those things, hopefully. I mean, I'm not the one that nominated or selected me for the award, so it's hard to say, but I'm guessing it's probably something to do with that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about your transition from teacher to financial advisor. What was it that inspired you to do that?
Yeah, so I was kind of familiar with the financial planning sector already because my dad was a financial advisor back in the day. It was pre-RDR, pre-financial crisis, when the regulatory landscape was very different, and he hadn't been a financial advisor for some time. But growing up as a child, he was. And so I was familiar with the profession, and, I'd kind of toyed with the idea of coming into it in the past, but had never really fully understood it. I never actually, as a child, really sat down with him and said, what is financial advice? Because you don't really do that as a child. You're probably more engaged in sort of video games and football and stuff like that. And so so I never really had that chat with him. And, I at university did a split degree. I did a degree in business management and German. And at university, I'd always considered both options. I'd considered going into financial planning, actually through some conversations with my dad, because he kind of worked still in financial services, and I think since the profession of financial advice and financial planning has become more of a regulated, maybe respectable profession. I don't know if I can say that, but I think it has done, in the sense that, you know, you've got now chartered financial planners, and there's much more regulation around advice. And so I think he was sort of saying to me, you know, why don't you consider this? And it was definitely something that I was considering. But I really enjoyed German as a language, and I enjoyed teaching it, and I taught it whilst at university, and I used to live in Germany and Switzerland as well. And so coming out of university, I wasn't 100% sure. I ended up teaching German, and that was great. It was a really rewarding career whilst I did it. And teaching was a rewarding thing to do. I think helping students to understand that was good, and I developed a lot of skills. But I have to say the kind of business and management and financial side of things was still very much there for me. I found myself reading things like the FT whilst I was a teacher, and had, it was already a kind of big interest for me whilst at university. And so I just felt that it was probably the right thing to do. I'm not saying I didn't leave teaching because it was the wrong thing to do. I think that sometimes maybe you have to go down one path to figure out the right path. And so anyway, that's what I did. I made the transition into financial planning, and haven't looked back since then, really. And I think it's been really, really good. And coming from a background in teaching, as I mentioned a moment ago, part of the role of a financial planner, I think, I mean, I would say this because I used to be a teacher, but I think there's a kind of very educational element of financial planning. We're not just financial experts and just deliver a load of expert information. I think a lot of it with clients is helping them to understand and engage with their financial affairs and their financial plan. And that does take some understanding, because at the end of the day, there's some really complex concepts, whether that's to do with the transitional tax-free amount in a pension, or the historic lifetime allowance, or whether it's trying to talk about a capital gain and the tax associated with that, or EISs or VCTs. These are concepts that most normal people off the street probably wouldn't be very familiar with. And so I think that trying to talk about that in a way which is strategic and analytical and also informative, but apply that to a client's financial plan so that they can understand it and have confidence in it, and understand and recognize that it is, or maybe sometimes isn't, the right thing for them, is a really key skill. And so I think, having done that a lot as a teacher, I mean, German's quite a complex language. It's got a lot of complex grammar rules. And so you have to be able to deliver that in a way that people are going to be able to understand it. And I think I did that a lot as a teacher. I think it's a skill that I've been able to bring with me into financial planning. And so that's been part of the transition, I suppose. Yeah, it's been a big factor for me, certainly.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I always say that maybe as like younger generations, we don't tend to stay in one career path forever. So it makes sense for you to transition from like teaching to financial advice, because I think I've already transitioned from like thinking I wanted to be a scientist to then being a journalist, to then going abroad to teach for a bit, to coming back to journalism. So all of those skills that I have picked up have been transferable, and I've been able to take bits and pieces from each thing. And I can definitely relate to the being able to make certain points digestible to people, and using that is as a tool. Like, obviously sometimes I have to do that in my work now. So yeah, I think it is important to have those life events, I guess, because it allows you to relate to people on a deeper level.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's really important. It's a really important element of financial planning, being able to listen to people, relate to people, and talk to them in a way that they will understand. Everyone's so different. So people understand things in different ways, and sometimes the same thing needs to be said in different ways to different people. And I think being able to have the emotional intelligence to recognize and identify that, and then also execute it is a real key skill. And like you say, a varied background and varied experiences and very varied career paths in the past will help, I think, to be able to achieve that. And I know that in the industry at the moment, there are plenty of advisors that have come from other careers. And in many cases, I think that is actually a real strength, because then you bring with you that varied life experience. And when you're sitting in front of a client who's maybe retired and has got a whole career behind them, and maybe they've owned and run a business and employed people, you have to be able to command some sort of respectability, I think, in terms of knowing what you're talking about and being able to talk to them on their level. So I think bringing good life experience with you is always going to be really valuable.
Yeah. And as someone who has just transitioned into financial advice, how have you approached both personal and professional growth to set yourself up for long-term success? I know that you said that you've been doing quite a few of the exams, and is there anything else that you've been doing to kind of just give yourself that edge?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. So I think the exams are really important. Obviously, exams are not everything, but in terms of the technical expertise, and maybe the kind of application of your knowledge from a theoretical perspective, I think exams are really, really important. I think also, I'm currently, I've got just a couple more exams before I have got the advanced diploma in financial planning, and then that obviously leads to chartered status. And so I think gaining that I would say it's really important. I know people feel differently about that, but I think when you're sitting in front of a client, it helps. And also helps you to command a little bit more knowledge maybe as well. So that's been a really important aspect of my development so far. I think there's a few other things though. So I have found that it's been really, really helpful to always have one foot outside of my comfort zone at all times. Okay. I think there's a kind of sweet spot between being stretched too far to the point where you feel like you're not able to kind of live up to what you're needing to achieve, and then also being too comfortable. I think it's really dangerous to be too comfortable. You definitely don't want to be in that place. So I think, having one foot outside your comfort zone all the time is really good. So you feel like you're always being stretched, always being challenged, always learning. And that's definitely something that I have tried to do as much as I can. And part of that has been always taking on the opportunity to be involved in new and varied planning experiences with maybe different clients and different scenarios that I've not experienced before. And also surrounding myself with others that are more experienced than me. I think that's also a really, really good thing. I remember somebody once saying to me about tennis, actually, in the past, that if you are the best person on the court, then you are probably the person who's developing the slowest. Okay. And I think what that means is, often it can be quite comfortable to be like, the best, I guess, the most qualified, the most experienced person in your circle. It can make you kind of feel quite good, I suppose. But actually, when you're around other people who are really experienced, have got loads of knowledge, have been doing it for a really long time, then you learn from them. And part of my development has been to definitely to do that and to learn from others around me, I guess. And so that's been a really important part of it as well. Just to take every opportunity that comes along. And to work hard, I suppose, as well. Yeah. Just, do as much as I can. So that's been it.
I think I've heard your tennis analogy, but different from a mentor of mine. But he just kind of bluntly was like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room, because if you're the smartest person in the room, there's nothing that you're gaining from being there. So I quite like being the dumbest person in the room, because there is so much there's so many questions I can ask. There's so much knowledge I can gain from the people around me. So also I don't mind looking like the dumbest person in the room, because sometimes I think that is a powerful position to have, because people are more likely to tell you things as well, because they're like, oh, she doesn't know anything. But yeah, I think, yeah, I think that's useful in bettering yourself. But I also wondered if you have had any experience with mentorship within financial advice, and how that might have helped with your development as a financial advisor.
So yeah, I think yes on both kind of receiving, being a mentee side of things, and also being a mentor side of things. So I'm really lucky because the company I work for, Attivo, has got a really good academy. And part of that journey for me, which I've kind of come through the Attivo Academy, has been to work for quite an extended period alongside one of our most senior financial advisors, one of our associate directors. And so to some extent, she has kind of been my mentor whilst I've been developing further into financial planning. And that's been really powerful. I think it kind of goes back to what I said before a little bit about surrounding yourself with people who are more experienced than you. And it just basically has meant that because I've worked, in that team and in quite a close way alongside her, whenever I've had a question or not being confident about something, or maybe there's been a technical issue or a technical question, or a question about how to approach something with a client or a client scenario, whatever it is, I've just been able to ask that. And so having somebody there like a guide or a mentor all the time, I think is really, really, really important for anybody coming into the industry or learning or in a developmental or academy kind of role. Or maybe who's somewhat junior in the industry, has got less experience. I think that's invaluable, really, because if I hadn't had that, then I'd have to ask someone, maybe somebody that I didn't know, or kind of book a meeting with our technical expert, and they might not know the client. And so yeah, having an experienced mentor, really, really important. I've also been able to be a mentor for some of the people coming into the industry fresh out of university, who are starting the academy, who are starting their RO exams with the CII, and be a mentor for them and their journey into that. And yeah, it's just really powerful and rewarding. It just reminds me of where I was at that time, and some of the questions that they ask, and it also reminds me, I guess, how much I've learned since then, which is nice. I think it's really good to be able to give that back, because I've been a beneficiary of it, and so it's nice to kind of pass that knowledge on to some extent. So yeah, I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. Paying it forward is always important. And I wondered if you could share any client interactions or projects that can showcase how your training, and also, all of the experiences, all of the skills that you've picked up along the way, and made a positive difference in someone's life, whether that be a client.
Yeah, I think there are a few different examples. The first thing that comes to mind is, I think I really like retirement income planning. I think that is a really fun form of advice, and a fun kind of stage of somebody's life to be able to give advice, because it's so impactful. And often the point of retirement can often be quite an uncertain time for a client. And it can be a big change in their lifestyle, in their income structure. Transitioning from a kind of accumulation to a de-accumulation stage is really, it can be challenging for people. So I think being able to be an advisor at that time, and I guess provide some reassurance, and be able to do some cash flow modeling, and to be able to give advice about what a client can and can't afford to do, is really good. I mean, there have been cases where I've kind of done a presentation meeting and gone through like a suitability letter and given the advice and shown the client the cash flow modeling, and they've sort of said, oh, okay, great, so I can do it, I can retire, right? I can go and like live the life I want to have and do all the holidays I want to do, and the travel, and spend the time with my family, and it's kind of been like, yes, you can do it. And that's quite rewarding, I think, to be able to do that. I think some other examples would be, so one time I had a client who was very ethically minded in terms of their investment portfolio, and they hadn't really engaged in their portfolio in a kind of in a detailed way in the past, and I was able to help them structure a portfolio that met their ethical preferences on quite a granular level. And we had a third party DFM involved, and we actually went to the DFM's headquarters and sat down with the portfolio manager, talked through the portfolio, talked through the rationale behind the ethical investment approach and ethical selection, and why a firm or an investment may or may not fall into a kind of ethical portfolio. And the client asked lots of questions and came away, really informed, really feeling positive about everything, engaging with their portfolio in a much more detailed way. And it basically ticked that box for them much more. And I think they felt like they were able to relate to it more, and it was more reflective of their own preferences. And so that was a good one. And then I think a final one would be, there was one client one time who was elderly, had lost capacity, and was going into a care home. And this was when I was working with the associate director that was part of my development, and she is a later life advice specialist. And so we were dealing with the client's children, who were his attorneys, and were able to set up a immediate needs annuity for him to be able to pay the care fees, and that provided a lot of reassurance for the children that their dad was going to be okay and not run out of money for care. And it was difficult for them because they were just sort of stepping into his financial planning from an unfamiliar place where they hadn't been engaged with it before. So I think there was a bit of reassurance that was needed and was able to be delivered. And so that was a really rewarding one too. So, there are loads of different examples I think I could give, but those are probably three where, it's had a particular, I guess it's been a really good experience for me.
Yeah. And as a kind of newer, younger advisor, I wondered where you see the industry heading in terms of the skills and qualities that will be essential for the next generation of financial advisors. And I also wondered, after you touching on that kind of later life part, and also his children not having had any experience with his kind of finances, I assume. So is there a part of you that's thinking more about the intergenerational aspect of making sure that you're not just speaking to your clients who, when you're doing their plans for retirement, but you're also kind of connecting with whether they have children or whoever it might be that might be their power of attorney? Is that something that you're also thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all quite familiar, all of us in the industry are familiar with the demographic challenges in our country in terms of having an aging population, a population that lives longer, more and more clients that are going to need advice, and also not enough advisors really to kind of to meet that need. So yeah, it's definitely something that we're thinking about. It's a bit of a taboo in this country, I think. That it's quite rare. I think it's probably less common when that people talk about their finances with others, even their children. Quite often that doesn't happen. I can think of so many cases where I've raised that, and a client maybe feels not like quite surprised about the idea or a bit uncomfortable about it. So, but it is really, really important, because ultimately, with people living longer, and becoming older, then that intergenerational wealth transfer is going to be a more important part of their planning, whether that's so that their children can help them in their own later life if they need that, if they lose the ability to do it for themselves, or talking about the transfer of wealth to the next generation too, and planning for that in advance. I think that's a really, really important area of planning. So definitely something on my mind, something I'm trying to promote. But I think it's a bit of a slow burn, because you raise it and it doesn't happen immediately, and often people need a chance to kind of think about the best way to do that. but in terms of the other trends in the industry and other skills and qualities, I just think financial planning is a really interesting role because it's one where expertise meets, meets emotional intelligence, I suppose.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have the financial expertise to provide advice, but you also need to have the emotional intelligence to relate to and talk to clients and to be able to listen to them, and to be able to help them achieve what they want in their life, because that's why we're doing it, right? We're not doing it just to grow like the portfolio for the sake of growing the portfolio. The clients usually have a reason for having the money, whether it's financial security in retirement or paying off a mortgage or, gifting to their children or saving for care in later life or whatever it is, like saving for their dream holidays. So I think as an advisor, it's really important to be able to understand that and then have the expertise to be able to do so. So anybody who I would, anyone who's coming into financial planning, I would sort of say that's definitely a kind of focus to make those two key skills, because one combined, because one is quite a kind of qualitative skill, whereas the other one's a bit more of a quantitative skill. And I think you've got to have both.
Yeah. And going back to you, how important have industry relationships and collaborations been in your early career? And what steps have you taken to build strong connections to support your growth?
I think they have been quite important. I think probably the area where that's been the most prominent has been with providers. So building up kind of a network of familiarity and people that I know at different providers is quite helpful, because if I've got a question about kind of a provider's product, or maybe a technical question that a provider or somebody at the provider firm might know about, might be able to help with, then it's nice to be able to just have people that you can call on and speak to for that. And that helps as well with understanding what's most suitable for a client too. So I think in terms of connections and industry relations, that has probably been the area where it's been most valuable for me so far, I think. But I mean, I've still probably got a long way to go with that, and much more to experience, and hopefully my network will grow much more over time as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And also, as someone who is already mentoring the next generation of advisors, I'm sure you already give great advice to those people. So I wondered if there's any advice you could share with anyone listening who might be thinking of taking that leap into a career in financial advice, and what are the best ways for them to develop themselves that you found?
Yeah. So I think number one is find a really great firm. I've been really, really lucky. Attivo are excellent, and they're really supportive, and they really invest in development, and they want to train the next generation of advisors really well. And the Attivo Academy has been really, really good and really supportive for me. And so I would say to anybody coming into the industry, find a good company that will help you on that journey, because that makes a huge difference. But then on top of that, that won't do everything for you, because you've still got to do plenty yourself. And so, yeah, just jump into it head first. I think work really, really hard, because you have to, basically, with all the exams and gaining all the experience. I mean, financial planning is great because you've got the ability to have a really good work-life balance. But at the same time, I think when you're coming into the industry, you have to work really, really hard at everything. Particularly the exams. I would definitely say do the exams as well as you can and as quickly as you can. Jump at every opportunity, never turn down an opportunity to get involved with something. And as I said before, surround yourself with really great people that are going to support you, that are willing to share their knowledge, willing to answer your questions. And yeah, I think that's really important. One of my first regional directors actually once said to me, he was like, Sebastian, if you work 10% harder than the average, you will do really well. And I've always tried to adhere to that. And I think I would probably pass that on as well to anybody else who's coming into the sector too. Okay. So yeah, it's worked for me so far, I think. I hope.
Yeah. I do wonder how I would measure what an extra 10% would be.
No, I think it's probably more the principle than the actual quantifiable.
Like, I'm trying.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just being too literal with it. I'm sorry. But finally, how important are industry awards like the Money Marketing Awards in recognizing excellence among new advisors and promoting the importance of investing in the future of the financial advice profession?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really important. We all work really hard, and I think it's really nice to have some recognition for that. I think that's really, really important. Going to an awards night, first of all, it's a great night out with your colleagues. Mm-hmm. You recognise the hard work of lots of others in the industry and hear about what others are doing. The industry gets some recognition as well. I think that's really important because financial planning is an important sector, but it's not the most well-known area of finance. And so I think that's important to recognise the industry as well as the individual. It's also just quite motivational to have a pat on the back. And I think, you work really, really, really hard every day. And I think having a bit of recognition is really nice. When I look at the award sitting on my desk, I kind of think, oh yeah, I feel a bit of pride about winning that. I remember back on the night, absolutely shocked to win it, did not expect to win it. And I'm sure that any of the candidates, if any of them had won it, it would have been very well deserved. But yeah, I think the awards are important in that respect. They're not the be all and end all. No. They're not why we do the job, but it's nice to have the pat on the back and to get a bit of recognition. So yeah, no, it's great.
No, it's so funny you mentioned that, but I was having a conversation in our morning meeting today about how it's very jarring and almost bizarre how you go from in school, like throughout school, you always get kind of that pat on the back, I guess. Every single time you achieve something, you do well in your GCSEs, you do well in your A levels, you did good on your homework, whether it's your parents doing that or your teachers, there's someone giving you that recognition. And then as soon as you go into employment, it's just like, yeah, you're expected to do that,
Yeah,
you're not going to get a pat on the back for doing your job. So shut up and get on with it. But awards are that, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's positive reinforcement, right? And that's so motivational. Positive feedback is always, I think, the best way to motivate anybody. Certainly, again, going back to my experience as a teacher with students, positive reinforcement always had far more impact than kind of,
scolding.
Yeah, or sort of like behavior, telling somebody off or something like that. I don't know. It was always much better to be positive. And so, yeah, it's motivational in that it's positive feedback, right? And so it's really nice to have and nice to experience. I'll certainly always look back on that night with really fond memories and pride. So it's great.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for speaking with me today, Sebastian. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great to talk to you and to talk about the awards night and the financial planning industry and the role of a financial advisor. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Money Marketing Podcast. We hope you've been inspired by the incredible journeys of our past award winners and are looking forward to the excitement of the 2024 Money Marketing Awards. Don't forget to subscribe for more valuable industry insights and be sure to secure your spot at this year's event. See you next time.